Good morning, and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. Maybe one of the most important things to see in our story about Elijah today is that even a man like him can be weak in faith and fail, just like we sometimes do. This week we are continuing to walk through the story of Elijah, seeing it from top to bottom, and not in parts and pieces like we get when Elijah appears in our Sunday scriptures. On Friday, we ended with the great success Elijah had on Mount Carmel, proving that God is the living God and slaying all the prophets of Baal. So you would think that after this, Elijah would be riding high and be bold in his faith. But when King Ahab got back to the palace, he told Jezebel what had happened and how all the priests of Baal had been killed, and Jezebel wasn't at all happy. She sent a messenger to Elijah saying, "By tomorrow you will be just like them." And instead of trusting in God and remaining bold in his faith, Elijah fled for his life. He headed out into the wilderness again and sat down under a tree and prayed that he might die. Elijah was in a place we often get to when we are weary of doing good and when our efforts to be faithful just seem to end up wasted. Then he fell asleep, and an angel woke him and said, "Eat and drink so you have strength for the journey." And he saw some fresh baked bread and some water and ate and drank. He fell asleep again, and again the angel woke him and made him eat. Then, strengthened, he went onward for a long time to Mount Horeb, the mountain of God. There he found a cave and spent the night inside. Then God said to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" And I hear God saying it with a little bit of annoyance in his voice. Here's his prophet, the man who is supposed to stand up for God, and he ran away at the first sign of threat. Elijah said, "I have been faithful, and they are destroying your altars and killing your prophets, and I alone am left." God told him to go to the mouth of the cave and stand there, for God was about to pass by. There was a great wind, so strong that the Bible says the wind was splitting mountains and breaking rocks. But God was not in the wind. And then there was an earthquake, but God wasn't in the earthquake either. Then there was a fire, and again, God was not there. But then there was the sound of sheer silence. And I love how the Bible describes that Elijah heard the silence. We usually think of silence as the absence of sound. But Elijah heard in the silence the presence of God. And before we go further, I think so often we get caught up in the storms of life only to discover that we can't find God there. I think that happens because in the storms of life, in our crises, we are so focused on the problems we are facing that we can't see beyond ourselves to see God with us. I believe that's what was going on with the wind and the earthquake and fire. The turmoil inside Elijah is mirrored in all of those. But then there is an awesome stillness. And you have to hear Psalm 46 where it says, "Be still and know that I am God." Beyond our turmoil, we encounter God who has been there all along. And once more, God asks Elijah, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" And this time I hear the same words spoken with tender compassion. And Elijah answers with the same answer about being the only one left, but this time he speaks not in desperation like before, but in heartfelt despair. God answers, "You are not alone. I am with you, and there are others." Then he gives Elijah a mission to anoint new kings and to anoint Elisha as his successor. And so that's what he did. One of the best things we can do when we get down or depressed or in despair is to be given a mission, to care for someone else, to reach out, to get beyond ourselves and see something larger. That often shakes us out of our malaise and re-engages us in life. That's what God did for Elijah. In his moment of weak faith, God found Elijah. In the midst of the storms of our life, God finds us too. Be still. Listen for the sheer silence. Know that God has found you. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.